This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Hello, dear Ahval listeners. I'm Ahval editor Gülten Sarı. Today we will discuss the UN Human Rights Council meetings on the human rights records of the member countries, including Turkey. As you know, since the coup attempt of 2016, there have been lots of human rights violations, including torture, including kidnapping people, ill treatment in prisons, many human rights violations, and of course, decline of the rule of law. So, the UN Human Rights Council discussed these violations, and the member countries made some recommendations to Turkey to correct this. And I have a guest who is the chair of Human Rights Foundation of Turkey, Professor Şebnem Korur Fincancı. She took place in that meetings, and she also explained their situations of human rights in Turkey, including torture. She talked about this, made a presentation. So, welcome to our program, Mrs. Fincancı.
Thank you, and wish you a successful broadcasting.
Thank you. Can you tell us about the sessions and what kind of recommendations or criticisms made against Turkey in terms of human rights violations?
This is the third circle of Universal Periodic Review for Turkey, and it has been a bit drastic in measures than the last second circle of Universal Periodic Review, because in the last one, in 2015, there were 278 recommendations, but this time it was 455, which is nearly twice the last one. And there were recommendations, yes, as you have mentioned, regarding the human rights violations in Turkey and the independence of, particularly the criticism on independence of judiciary, and also many detained journalists and human rights activists in the country, while they didn't have a full implementation of all European Court human rights rulings with an adequate time frame. For example, Ahmet Altan and Selahattin Demirtas were some who were raised about this session, and also Osman Kavala, while just at the day of the review and the process, there was the court hearing, and unfortunately, again, they decided against releasing Kavala. And also, there were discussions about violation of right to freedom of peaceful assembly and peaceful demonstrations, just having an alibi about public order, public health, and public morals regarding the LGBTI plus pride marches. Also, torture was another issue, not only in the prisons, but the police custody, as well as during the peaceful demonstrations where the excessive use of force by police have been just amounted to torture with the usage of excessive amount of tear gas and just beatings, and also with all these kidnappings where people have been just kidnapped for several months and then discovered at police custody immediately with allegations of torture, but with no lawyers, no wish to be examined properly, and the effective investigation and documentation of torture have been totally just denied for these people. So it was a real discussion both during the session and also during the side events before the session.
Yeah, as far as I understand from your comments that there was a high pressure on Turkey on these violations and on these issues. So how did the Turkish side defend itself against such a amount of human rights violations, accusations, even if we call them recommendations, in the eye of public or in front of these countries being subjected that great amount of criticism is not something good for a country, I assume.
Unfortunately, of course, the criticism has been just there, and also the unfortunate part of it is the responses by the Turkish authorities, because, for example, the alibi for just interrupting the peaceful demonstration of Saturday Mothers was it had a side effect to tourism. The tourists have been disturbed by the Saturday Mothers. So it was like just kidding people and kidding people who listened them there during the session and raising the questions and the criticism during the session. And also, according to the Turkish authorities, everybody in the prisons who have been detained, a long pre-trial detention, were just due to terrorism. And all of these people, the journalists, are not journalists but terrorists. The human rights defenders who have been jailed are not human rights defenders actually, but terrorists themselves. And also about the Kurdish region, the municipalities have been discussed during the session, for example, and they said that there were investigations against the mayors, and because of that, they had to just end their function as the mayor and had to appoint the governors for the municipalities. However, we all know that there were no investigations at all for many of the mayors, while they were just dismissed from the municipality and detained. But afterwards, they started the investigations and immediately have indictments against these people regarding the terrorism or terrorist propaganda. So all the opponents were accused as terrorists during the session. And even, for example, there was one of the issues about the women and the gender-based discrimination. And the vice minister just told that if we see that he's the only male in the committee, while there were many women, however, they were all inactive, dysfunctional, and the only person who talked was a male himself. Mm-hmm. So it was really disturbing to hear all the lies throughout the session against the criticism.
Yeah, finally, I want to ask, a report will be issued by the Council, in the next few days maybe. What's your expectation regarding the content of the report? What kind of accusations or recommendations will be done to Turkey to correct the main problems?
I hope that a real criticism on the abolishment of rule of law and dependency of the judiciary with the government should be raised in the report. And also, I hope that the attacks against the human rights defenders, journalists, and the opponents should be dealt with in the report. But of course, we have to be cautious about what would be included in the report, because we know that these states have economic relationship and they never end the economic relationship or have some serious and sincere attempt to limit their relationship with Turkey, the Turkish government. So we hope and we try our best just to show the picture, the real picture in Turkey. For example, regarding torture, we have the highest numbers last year, and it has been the systematical torture that have been discussed during the session. So we hope that we could be able to explain the situation in the country, which would be included in the report.
Professor Fincancı, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for just giving me a voice in your program.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.